Zach, is there anywhere specifically you wanted to start?
Let's make everybody wait a little bit for either of the main headlines, because I'm really excited to talk horse race with you. One of the things we just wear on our sleeve over here at the Vanguard is that we don't have a lot to look forward to in this world in 2025. And one of the things that we kind of indulge in for fun, for hopium, to make sure that we always have some way of activating and energizing people to pay attention to politics is we do lean into the horse race a little bit, and we like to speculate, okay? We care about the Democratic primary too much, all right? I'll say it right now, but we care about it a lot, and we're going to speculate about it, and you're going to hear about it a lot over the next 3 years. So anyway, without further ado, Gavin, what's your thoughts? You wanted to begin with a little bit of analysis.
Sure, yeah, let's go through this. It's not technically my analysis, but I'll give my analysis, and you can give your analysis of Edinger Minton's analysis, one of my favorite Substack pages.
Is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah, Edinger Minton.
Okay,
it comes from it's such a niche reference that I'm not even quite familiar of where the meme comes from. I'm not even sure where the meme comes from. But it's based on some meme from like maybe 2021 or something.
Okay, interesting. I get the Bush lied, people died thing, which is that person's Twitter handle, but I've never really understood the Edingermentum. And I've also always pronounced it wrong to myself when I'm reading it. I always called it Edingermentum. And
maybe that is how it's pronounced. I don't know.
I have no idea.
Either way, if anyone in the chat remembers what this was a reference to, I knew at one point, but I totally forgotten. It's escaped me entirely. But either way, I definitely recommend you guys all sub to Edingermentum on Substack. It's a great newsletter, only $5 a month. You know, some of my favorite content on Substack, and like us, Edingermentum is a diehard, unabashed horse race junkie. It's what, Zach? It's May 6, 2025, and this is already the second power ranking he's put out on the power, as far as the top contenders for the next election. Yep, exactly. So this is a good list. Like I said, second one he's written. I agree with a lot of this analysis. He puts in the dishonorable mentions category, Zach, this time Gavin Newsom, which is a fall from the last time. He had previously been ranked at number 10 on this guy's list. Now he's fallen into the dishonorable mentions along with Cory Booker. And by the way, this might be shocking to some people because everyone was blowing smoke up Cory Booker's ass, all these, liberals on TV, and even some people in our own comments, right, for the stupid charade he did. Let me tell you, just on an anecdotal level, I don't know anyone that was impressed by that. Even the most hardcore, like MSNBC pilled liberal folks I know, people in my family, people in my life, IRL, they thought it was dumb. They thought it was freaking stupid. Again, people that voted for Joe Biden, people that voted for Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders, even they were like, what the fuck did that accomplish? Like, how did Cory Booker talking for 25 hours, like, what did that do? It was just a huge performative virtue signal. So I'm actually, not surprised to see Cory Booker fall to the dishonorable mentions. Do you agree with that, Zach, or do you think that the establishment really will be successful in kind of pushing him as their next big guy?
Oh, no, I don't think that they're going to be successful at all. Look, we saw what Cory Booker was capable of in the 2020 primary, and that was not much. This dude could, with all the media help in the world, with all the fanfare, with all the, he's the next Obama, which was a little racist. Let's be honest, he's not the next Obama. The thing is, even with all of that, did he ever get above 5%? I don't even think he sniffed 5% in the polls. He was a disaster. He has no organic base, and he still doesn't. I think if he runs in 2020, he'll do about as well at maximum. And I'm talking maximum, probably without the Iowa factored in, because, this bastard stole Iowa. I think he'd do it about as well as Pete Buttigieg did, maximum in 2020, which is that if everybody,
pretty good, though.
All of the stuff, probably not that well. I'm just saying as a maximum, as his glass ceiling, even if everything went his way, even if they roll out.
Like, he could do some damage, but just not actually win.
Exactly. I think he could pull 3 or 4% again in the, broad stroke. I think he could get on the debate stage, but there's no way I would expect him to win. And I'm talking about if everything goes his way, he could pull, 4 or 5% again. But I also think there's a chance that he would just totally be unnoticed and that he would be at the kiddie debate table this time around, and it would be way more embarrassing for the guy. So who knows if he'll even actually decide to run. I'm wondering if Gavin Newsom, to reference the earlier guy, is just totally out on it right now because his brand is in the mud. He's huddling up to right wingers. I'm thinking that he's going to go and take a cushy job as a consultant, write a book, maybe lean into his podcast. I don't think he runs for president after he's done being governor.
We'll see. I think that there is a road to a comeback with Gavin Newsom, specifically as Trump starts to really bring the hammer down on Hollywood. If Gavin Newsom's able to respond in a way that's impressive and it feels like he's standing up for the state of California and for the industry of entertainment, that could maybe elevate him back into the conversation, but I'm not even convinced
He's fighting from so far behind too.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't even know if he has it in him to do that. I'm just saying if he did, then maybe. But yeah, I agree. I think there's a chance he sits it out because of how far his popularity has plummeted, even in the last few months. But a lot can change in a couple months. Also, Stephen A. Smith here in the dishonorable mentions category. This is crazy, Zach. Despite having done nothing other than talk about sports during his career, he is the sole prospective Democratic candidate to be in the net negatives among the party's base. While it is not unprecedented for a figure this hated to end up winning a major party nomination in the end, it's hardly common either. So that's pretty hilarious. He's the only one that's really seriously teased, like, I think I'm going to run, but immediately met with net negative favorabilities, which is hilarious. And I guess not all that unexpected given some of the just stupid comments he's made in the last couple months.
I think that if Stephen A. Smith genuinely wanted to get into politics, there would be a way for him to do so that he could be successful in. There's a way for him to find a savvy niche. There's a way for him to find the right district. There's a way for him to find the right race if he was serious about doing this. But one, he doesn't belong in a Democratic primary. You know what Stephen A. Smith would give me the vibes of? The kind of maneuver that RFK did, where he kind of began in the Democratic primary, but then he would switch over to this kind of like independent who mostly caters to Republicans or people who were like, you know, Matt Taibbi pilled, and at one point I identified as a Democrat, but then they stopped pandering to me, and now I have to hate trans people, and you know, whatever pet issue. But I can't see him ever getting over like 3%, 4%. I could see him getting a ton of media attention because he understands how the media works. That's one thing Stephen A. Smith has going for him, but I don't think he understands how politics works. And so I think he would struggle if he just cannonballed right into a Democratic primary for sure. I don't think he would get above 5%.
Yeah, I think a big issue with Stephen A. Smith is he came out of the gate with all these intense criticisms of the Democratic Party, and he's not wrong about any of them. The Democrats, he's 100% right about all of the ways in which they failed, and all of the ways in which, you know, they suck. But he didn't really have a solution. It was like, okay, so your solution is just to point out the issue and be a loudmouth, but like, what are you going to do to change the party? Like, what policies are you going to embrace to make the party popular again? He didn't seem to have much in the way of actual solutions, you know, just a lot of identifying of the problem and then again being a loudmouth, which is fine. That's kind of his job, but I think that's, you know, proof that he's probably not really serious about this.
Oh yeah, he also immediately ran back to the warmth of right-wing culture war talking points because that's his comfort zone. He is a liberal guy in the sense that he's not a deranged racist, and if you were to be considered a right-wing sports commentator, you basically just have to be a racist piece of shit. Like Stephen A. Smith is, I would not consider like a very serious sports commentator, right? He's much more into beefs. He's much more into the
sounds like me.
Yeah, of creating the drama, and that's totally fine. That's what he does. He's an entertainer, right? And he totally embraces that. And I think he takes his journalism seriously. But you know what I mean? He's very interested in the, you know, battle back and forth kind of a deal.
A man after my own heart.
Exactly. No, totally. But you and I wouldn't go to that and be like, we're hardcore journalists. Right. It's like, yeah, we do journalism and we take that seriously when we do it. But the other hat we wear is entertaining people and beefing. Yep. And Stephen A. Smith is a master at beefing. But what he does also really lean into is a lot of these more antiquated, heteronormative, you know, masculine stereotypes.
I remember he was dissing, like, what was it, Serena Williams for being part of the Kendrick thing. He was like, why are you participating in this crip walk or something? It was like, bro, shut the fuck up.
Everybody was like, you're single for a reason. It's happily married. Leave her alone. But this one surprises me at number 10. Jasmine Crockett has been getting a lot of love and a lot of attention. But do you think that she has been getting enough love and enough attention to succeed and distinguish herself in a really cutthroat Democratic presidential primary as an early on newcomer into politics?
I think that, you know, this piece from Edinger Minton makes some really good points. I'm not quite prepared to say that she's actually like seriously considering a run for the presidency.
Seems like a big leap.
I get exactly. That's what I've even AOC, you know, she spent like 3 terms in Congress building that name recognition. Jasmine Crockett does still seem to be pretty new. You know, it seems like a lot of people are still just kind of finding out about her, deciding how they feel about her. But it's interesting that Edinger Minton kind of characterizes her as a shameless demagogue, which is precisely where Crockett comes in. And in his opinion, maybe precisely what the mood of the country will want in 2024. If you haven't heard of the second term backbencher representative, I don't blame you. Ever since she entered Congress in 2023, Crockett has introduced only a few dozen bills, none of which have even passed the House. Her views are standard fare, for a member of the CPC, and she represents a district so uncompetitive that no Republicans even bothered to contest it in 2024. But this is important, guys. What she does have in spades is the shamelessness and showmanship necessary to be a political star in the 21st century. Simultaneously, a partisan hack and a rabble-rousing outsider, Crockett has spent the past 2.5 years dedicating to telling liberals everything they want to hear and fighting everyone they hate all of the time and without any concern for consistency or decorum. So he's definitely, critical of her, saying that she hasn't really succeeded in actually legislating, passing bills, not very effective in that sense. But she does have a shamelessness. She is a rabble rouser. And those are qualities that, unfortunately, in this era, the Democratic Party must embrace if they're going to fight fire, right? They have to fight fire with fire. And Jasmine Crockett does have some of those qualities.
Oh, yeah. No, she has a ton of the qualities. She basically has every quality that I would really like from a progressive rising star. What I would be skeptical about is what he calls, the partisan hackery.
Right.
And sometimes I do get that vibe from Jasmine Crockett. I know a lot of people in our audience aren't going to want to hear that, but sometimes she does kind of go along with the blue wave. There's been a ton of times where she, as far as I know, she hasn't been very vocally outspoken on Palestine. As far as I know, she hasn't really been there on the letters that I've seen come out. Jasmine Crockett's not a name that I see on there, right? So I agree that, for a standard fare, congressional progressive caucus kind of a person right on the money, and more of a aggressive progressive that we've been saying. Like we talked about how we liked how she didn't back down from her Governor Hot Wheels. Don't really love alleging that Trump stole the 2024 election, though. I don't think that is a very good look for somebody that's going to try and run for president. But I do love insulting Nancy Mace to her face by calling her a child, and insulting MTG to her face, calling her, among other things, a butch.
To be honest, I do kind of disagree with you on this one, just because Trump has dragged us into such a post-reality world that, again, I feel like you kind of have to fight fire with fire, even if that means sacrificing some of your intellectual principles. And if it means getting in the muck and saying you think we stole the election? You fucking stole the election. I don't know, because I don't want to just descend into this area where we never return to an era of where the facts and the truth matters. But it does feel like in order to get out of this era, we might have to get on that level.
Here, it's not so. I mean, I do personally have a grievance and a reluctance to get on that level.
To lie.
Yeah. But here's the other thing that I also have a problem with. I don't think it was necessarily smart for Trump. I guess it worked for him because of the unique set of circumstances that led to his reelection, right? And we have to grapple with that. So I'm not saying it can't be effective, but I also don't want to just depress voter turnout. One of the big problems the Democrats had was depressed turnout, right? Joe Biden brought out way more people to vote than Kamala Harris did. Why that is, we could talk about for ever and ever, but the reality is that he brought out tremendously more people.
Was it that he brought out more people, or is this a Trump brought out even more in 2020?
From what I saw was that far more Democrats decided to stay home in 2024 than in 2020. And it was in large part due to the fact that I think a lot of people had more time on their hands in 2020. We were all coming out of the pandemic. I don't know.
And there wasn't a fucking genocide going on that the Democrats were sponsoring.
And that exactly too. So they weren't exactly making themselves popular. And I think in hindsight, something that I was worried about at the time, but tried to bury in myself, was the fact that people were pissed off that, they did the swap without a real primary. You know what I mean? I thought that they were going to get away with it potentially because they went with the actual VP and it was clear that Joe Biden was unfit to serve, but the American people didn't go with it. So anyway, I don't know. I just think that I don't want to depress turnout anymore, not to get into the weeds.
Sure.
This is a very interesting take of Jasmine Crockett. I think she's definitely a person in Congress for progressives to watch and see if she does kind of meet the moment and start to realize, okay, there is a lane for me to be a progressive and let me try and, enter the squad era where I'm really backing up Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar and the other leaders of the Free Palestine movement in Congress.
Yeah, I also think that with this, it's not something that if she ran, it's not something I think she should run on. I don't think it's a good idea if Jasmine Crockett ran for president to make this a central issue of her campaign. I don't think she should bring it up on the debate stage. I don't think she should really bring it up much at all anymore. What I do think this represents, though, that's a good quality, is that she's not afraid to just say crazy things that will trigger the media. That's what Trump does. That's what a lot of Republicans do. They'll kind of just shoot from the hip. They're not running every statement through a fucking fact checker. And I do think the Democrats could really benefit from that. I think John Fetterman, before he had a stroke, exhibited some of those qualities on the campaign trail when he had that epic primary against Dr. Oz. Just being able to kind of meme and say shit and get under their skin, trigger them a little bit. I think that's a good quality. But I definitely hear you, and I don't think she should lean into it and like make it a cornerstone of her ideology either.
Yeah, and people are saying that she's actually pro-Israel, which would be a huge red flag for me.
I've also heard she's pro-crypto. So yeah,
double strike. See, you gotta put that shit down before I can get behind her attitude way more than I could get behind her policy.
100%. That's been my that's what I've said for a while now, is that like I don't agree with her a ton on her votes and her actual ideology, but I do love her spirit. I love her fire. But next up is actually Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who I know you have a lot of thoughts on, Zach. She's down in this list. Obviously, a lot of people really hyped her up. But according to this analysis, despite a ready-made appeal as a purple state liberal warrior with a long list of accomplishments, Whitmer has bafflingly decided to follow the Gavin Newsom route of conciliation, a bad idea that she somehow implemented even worse in practice. And I totally agree with that. I don't think it's been good for her 2028 chances, specifically the one photo where she holds the binder in front of her face. Like, it's one thing to meet with the president. Like, I don't think you should be punished as a governor for appearing in a photograph with the fucking president of the United States, but to be all like chicken about it, like what?
Bro, that was one of the moments where I was like, it's over for her. I think Keith Olbermann actually tweeted that photo out, and it was like, no chance in 2028 anymore. Because you're right. And we talked about this while we were on a walk yesterday. There was a way for her to be like, you know what, guys, this is my role. The people of my state elected this man to be. I would disagree with this, by the way, let me be clear. But there would be a way for her to go out there and be like, this is the people of my state elected this man. I'm going to negotiate on behalf of the people of Michigan. This is the auto capital of the country, and this is a huge industry for the people of Michigan. And I have a duty to them as governor to make sure that they are not devastated by these tariffs. Like it or not, this is my job. I don't like it. I have massive disagreements with the president. We can litigate those at a later time. Right now, I have to go advocate on behalf of the people of Michigan. That's how, as a politician, you do that, and you do it successfully. But if you look like a coward, if you look like you've been caught with your pants down, if you look like you're in the middle of a dream and you're not wearing any clothes and you're in front of the whole auditorium of school and everybody's laughing at you and you just cover up your face and wish it's all over, that is a horrible and unpresidential way to respond to something that you know is going to bring you criticism. She did absolutely nothing to take it on the chin, and she didn't even learn from her mistake because she got caught again. And what I really am frustrated by is the fact that Gretchen Whitmer is smarter than this. She's allowing herself to be played by Donald Trump because she didn't know that he was going to make it all about the cameras the first time. And to be honest, you have to be really thick to not suspect you're going to be media set up when you're interacting with Donald Trump. He wants you to kiss his ass on camera, and that's what it looked like you were doing, but you were too shy the first time. And then the second time, he has you in front of the troops, and he's like, well, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, aren't you going to address our troops? It's like, you have to be smarter than that. You have to put barriers in front of yourself. You need to have a better campaign, or not campaign, but chief of staff. You have to have advisors making sure you don't look fucking terrible, because this makes you look weak and it makes you look playable.
Yeah. I think the second instance, like, I guess a lot of people feel differently. I don't think the second instance was as big of a deal. Like, what is she supposed to not show up and address the troops or something? Like, wouldn't that have turned into a whole other scandal itself? Gretchen Whitmer refuses to, appear in front of the Michigan State Guard or whoever the fuck that was. Like, I think that when it comes to that sort of thing, you kind of just have to do what your fucking job is in that instance. Although I guess there would have been a superior way to protest or maybe boycott that. But when it came to that first one with the binder, I mean, that's just fucking completely stupid. I don't get that at all.
And to your point, if it was just the instance if you erase the binder event from history and it's just her speaking in front of the soldiers, I think she takes criticism, but she can own it. Kind of like I suggested she should have the first time. She could have been like, exactly like you said, I respect our troops. I'm the governor. These people are making a sacrifice. I'm here to honor them. I have massive political disagreements with the president. The people of my state elected him. It is not my job to litigate him on this day. It's my job as governor to lead, yada, yada. She could have sold that. That would have made her look presidential. Dare I say, she could have turned it into a way to look diplomatic. However, in the shadow of the first event, it just makes her look like she's falling for Trump's traps. And that's exactly what he wants. And I just wish somebody would have pulled her aside and been like, hey, this is Donald Trump. You're going to get set up for media embarrassment. Like, make sure that that's on your radar so that you can spin it and make it look like you're just doing your duty by falling on the sword.
Yeah. And again, I don't think most people would have cared that much. Like, I think most people understand that if you're a governor of a fucking state, you're probably at some point going to have to talk to or negotiate with the fucking president. Like, that's not crazy, right? In the same way, I wouldn't hold it against the president of the United States for meeting with like Putin or fucking Kim Jong-un, right? These are all world leaders. We have to put our differences aside and act like adults. But, you know, if there was a photo of like Joe Biden in the room with Putin and he was holding a magazine over his face to make sure that no one could tell or pretend that no one could know, that would be hugely embarrassing. It would make America look weak as fuck. So I think it's a sort of similar situation. But to go to the next one on the list, Zach, Governor Tim Walz at number 8. And unfortunately, according to this analysis, he hasn't really succeeded in the post-2024 landscape, despite his attempts to. Walz has been attempting the exact same thing, even getting significant coverage by successfully baiting Elon Musk into feuding. If the bull case for him was the right one, he should have seen a boost in the polls from this. No ifs, ands, or buts. Instead, he's remained completely stagnant. While it's obviously true that the top candidates of the primary aren't going to be determined by who gets the most hype 3 years before people are voting, this disinterest is still deeply concerning for Walz. And I agree, because I've had interest in Walz from the beginning. But for whatever reason, it never seemed like the rest of the public quite got there. Even in the primary, I thought that, like, I was shocked by the fact that more folks just out there IRL didn't respond to him positively. And now, despite the fact that he's been beefing with Musk and doing these rallies, it still seems like he's remaining pretty stagnant in the 2028 polling. Do you think he should probably just stick to the governor's mansion in Minnesota and drop this, Zach? Or do you think he could forge ahead?
If he wants to be president, he needs to change. I'll put it to you that way. If he wants to be president, he has to be more aggressive. He has to be more bold. He has to be more self-assured. This whole I'm a Midwest nice guy works only if you back it up with your spine, only if you have some backbone, only if you're clear. Do you know what it really makes me crave? And I know this is an unfair thing to ask for, but I wish that he had the stature and delivery of another famous Minnesota politician, a famous governor, perhaps, like Jesse Ventura. Because when Jesse Ventura talks, people listen and people come and hear what the fuck he's saying, right? Yep. We had the luxury of talking to him and interviewing him in Minnesota, and we talked about how he talked to us about how, you know, he would show up to colleges and he would get the kids swinging from the Raptors. He would get them so excited about the change that they could make. He was like, Minnesota had same day registration, so I didn't care if I was, you know, running right up until the finish line, getting all these kids registered, doing all of this good work, because he knew how to excite people. He knew how to motivate people. He has the skill set that, you know, Tim Walz does not. Clearly, Governor Walz is an effective politician. He's a effective diplomat on the state level. He's done incredible things for the state of Minnesota. He seems like a lovely guy, but he doesn't have the presence right now that I think you have to exude, right? He doesn't have the aura of
the larger than life.
Exactly. The prestige. You have to be somebody that can carry everyone. And one of the things that I think helps Donald Trump so much is that he was just a fixture of, you know, that he was in everybody's living room. Even if you hated him, and I was wrong about this, guys. I thought that he had so much baggage. I thought with the lawsuits, with January 6th, with everything. And you have to reflect on that. Like, no, this guy is larger than life, as Gavin put it. You need somebody with that heroic stature. And I think that one of the reasons that Joe Biden was able to succeed, among others, being a white guy who was a Catholic, right? You know, just like a good old boy vibes, you know, ancient. But the fact that he'd kind of spent 8 years as Barack Obama's vice president, you know what I mean? He'd been somebody that people were deeply familiar with, and he had a presence at one time that people could remember. Was it reflected in his 2020 run? No, of course not. That's why they hid him from the public constantly. But they could remember his, you know, thundering delivery against Paul Ryan, or if they were old enough, they could remember him on the Senate floor. He'd been in American politics for so long at that level that I think that he kind of scratched that larger than lifeness, not to the extent of somebody like Trump or Obama, but, you know, potentially, but way more than Walz is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I agree. I think that so far Walz has kind of struggled to, you know, extend his appeal nationwide. I think he has Minnesota down. His style of politics really works there. But yeah, I agree. He could maybe be a little more powerful, a little bit more commanding. I think the debate against JD Vance was the number one example to point to of how he failed to really command a situation or a dynamic. But if he's able to pick up that skill, I still think he could be a formidable opponent. Also, going back to Jesse Ventura, Zach, I continue to think that one of the biggest mistakes that Democrats made in 2024 was not inviting Governor Jesse Ventura to speak on Kamala and Tim Walz's behalf at the DNC in Chicago. The Republicans brought out Hulk Hogan, right, to speak on behalf of them, but the Democrats thought they were above having Jesse the Body Ventura come out and deliver what undoubtedly would have been a fucking barn-storming, barn-burning speech. I mean, that would have lit up the weekend. That would have been the number one most viral clip from the whole DNC. A DNC, which, by the way, was otherwise boring and otherwise was, unfortunately, dominated by discussion of the Palestinian protests. So, that was an idiotic move. And Jesse went on MSNBC the weekend before to basically audition to do exactly that. They still said, I think we're a little bit too serious. I think having a wrestler, even though you were also a governor and a mayor, I think that is kind of beneath us.
That's exactly how they behaved. And I think potentially maybe they were concerned that he was going to say something about ending the wars, which the Democrats had no.
That also would have helped them win.
Oh, it would have helped them win for sure. But I just mean part of their lack of judgment was that they would have been concerned about him actually delivering. I'm a veteran, the wars machine, blah, blah. Even if it was just passing, I think that they were really trying to control people. And Jesse Ventura is not the kind of guy that's going to let you dictate what he says when he's on stage.
Yeah. So, but I mean, like I said, he went on cable news a few times. We reviewed the appearances. It's not like he was saying crazy, out of control shit. Like, he was
been amazing.
Yeah.
I'm not arguing that they shouldn't have done it. I was just speculating as to why.
Because they're fucking cowards.
Well, that would be the underlying reason for sure. Who do they have at 7 though? Because I'm curious.
Pete Buttigieg.
Edge. We were talking about this and we mentioned it a little bit with Pisco too when he was on our show the other day, that he had the the really good appearance with Andrew Schultz. Mm-hmm. I know you watched that entire thing. Did it change your opinion of Pete Buttigieg?
A couple things have not changed my opinion. I still think it is hard. This guy's a total, McKinsey made product, right? That's all he is, right? He's a Rhodes Scholar. He's another Obama. He's one of these fucking neoliberal types. I don't think that if he actually became the president, he would be all that great of a president, but I do think he would be a good candidate. And I don't think we can deny that, right? Like, I do think that candidate Pete Buttigieg would be very effective. Again, what I worry about is President Pete Buttigieg. That, I think, would be right back to the Clinton era, right back to the Obama ethos, right? That's the issue. Like I said, he's a straight up product of the McKinsey world. But it is undeniable that Pete Buttigieg has massively matured and evolved as a communicator, as a debater. And I think there's no better evidence of that than his appearance on the Andrew Schultz podcast. He absolutely destroyed. He absolutely killed on that show. Not only did he have the right answers and was able to speak eloquently about the solutions, but he came off as very normal. He didn't come off as elitist. And also, I have to say, growing that beard was a great idea, because in the last election, he looked like Rat Boy. And now he looks like a grown man ready to lead a party.
Bro,
you know what I'm saying?
Okay, listen, I'm a person that rocked a beard for the first time and I've kept it forever, right? I've never shaved it off. I've always had some level of a beard. And that's because it's like sunglasses for your face. You know what I mean? It gives you a whole new look. It really adds a level of mystique, makes you look older. And God damn it, has it not been more beneficial to Pete Buttigieg than any other person I've ever seen. The fact that he grew a beard, he looks about 8 years older. He looks like Pete Buttigieg's older brother. And you're like, you know what? God damn it. You are going to be a threat in the primaries. Like, you might be able to weasel your way into a couple of W's. You know what I mean? He is going to be a formidable opponent unless something changes. I would have Pete further down on the line than number 7. Not in terms of somebody that I would personally like to see win, obviously, but just in terms of contenders, I think he is going to stick around. Now, here's the one thorn in Pete's side. He is going to get called out by everyone for not having enough experience. He hasn't won statewide elections. He hasn't won any kind of, congressional race. He was mayor of South Bend, Indiana, which most people can't even point to on a map. I don't even know where the fuck it is, and I've been to
It's in Indiana.
Well, yeah, obviously it's in Indiana, yeah. But you know what I mean? So I think he will get knocked by everyone for that. He's going to pitch himself as somebody who has a different.
Well, he was the
experience.
transportation secretary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just think they're going to try and knock him for that.
Oh, they definitely will. They definitely will. Specifically because a lot of the people that are going to be running in 2028 will be governors, and governors, they're going to be so pissed off. They're like, "Are you serious? You fucking mayor, get the fuck out of here!" Like, I run a whole state. I'm an executive. You're a clown.
I tell mayors what to do for a living.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. And also, like, I mean, I'm sure he was better at being the transportation secretary than the current guy, Sean Duffy or whatever. But like, I mean, it's not like anyone can really point to anything that it's not like he revolutionized the rails or
he came to our city and he cut the airport ribbon when it opened, Gavin.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, he definitely, did some stuff with Build Back Better, but that was more like, it's not like he really seemingly excelled in that role. He just kind of did his job. And also, obviously, there were disasters like East Palestine that happened under his watch, and he didn't really respond to that adequately. So who knows if that'll come up. But like I said, I think the beard, him going from like a rat boy mayor who looks like he's 27 years old to like a more mature guy. He kind of dropped the Obama cadence too. He's kind of developed his own way of communicating.
That was a huge benefit
and
to him.
Speaking, right? And now it's more Josh Shapiro, who we're going to hear from later, who's really gone full Obama. But either way, I think, Pete will be a formidable foe. I think that he really will be. In fact, I don't think that Pete's going to win in 2028. But I do kind of think he'll be like remember in the 2016 election, if we can go all the way back that far, remember Ted Cruz and his, presence in that race? He came very close. Obviously, Trump.
He won Kansas. He beat
Kansas.
Trump in the state that we were living in at that time.
I think Pete, in some ways, could be like the Ted Cruz of the Democratic primary, where he does some serious fucking damage. He takes out a lot of guys. He stays in there till the end. He does good at the debates, but I don't quite think he makes it. And by the way, maybe the only reason I came to that conclusion, Palm Sanity, is because Ted Cruz also really benefited from growing a beard. He also looks way better and
right,
less evil.
And I would have Pete way further down than number 7. But who does he have at number 6?
Let's take a look. Oh, and also the reason why I don't think Pete can actually pull it off is because I still don't see any proof that he can really succeed in southern states and really diverse states like a South Carolina. He did miserably in states like that. He did terribly with voters of color in Nevada.
He fired the black chief of police in South Bend, and I think it was like the first black chief of police ever in South Bend, Indiana. Indiana is racist as fuck for anybody who's never been there. Like, I'm not saying that there's not good black culture in Indiana. For sure there is, but I just mean like the white people in Indiana are historically racist as fuck in the Hoosier state. Anyway, JB Pritzker, I'm out on JD Pritzker. We were talking about this yesterday. Gavin sent me a funny meme and I was like, fuck JD Pritzker, fucking didn't vote for, he vetoed that, worker protection bill in Illinois, and now he wants to dress up like a Jedi and get cheap points with people. So I actually don't think that Pritzker is going to have much success. I would definitely expect Pete Buttigieg to do better than Pete Buttigieg to do better than Pritzker. But what do you think, Gavin?
Well, did you see Pritzker's like statement the other day where he was like, we got to stop playing games. We got to go on the offense and really take down these fuckers. Yeah. I forget exactly what he said. Here it is, actually. Fellow Democrats, for far too long, we've been guilty of listening to a bunch of do-nothing political types who would tell us that America's house is not on fire, even as the flames are licking their faces. Today, as the blaze reaches the rafters, the pundits and politicians whose simpering timidity served as kindle for the arsonists. Damn, I didn't realize this man was so well spoken. Holy fuck. Urge us now.
Yeah.
Now I feel like I'm reading like the freaking founders here, like, Thomas Jefferson or something, like talking about the British. Those same do-nothing Democrats want to blame our losses on our defense of black people and trans kids and immigrants instead of their own lack of guts and gumption. So I do really appreciate he's taking kind of the Gavin Newsom route, where instead of caving to the Republicans on those issues specifically, he's saying, no, we got to continue to stick up for black people, trans kids, immigrants, marginalized people in general, instead of throwing them under the bus in some pathetic attempt to, get a few extra votes from racist people. So I appreciate that. And then I will throw this up on screen too, because you referenced it, Zach. Here he is dressed up for May the 4th. Nice contrast to the photo posted by the White House of Donald Trump holding a red fucking lightsaber. If you want to throw that up too, so fucking stupid, so funny. I genuinely can't even tell at this point if they're just trying to bait people.
It's clearly AI too.
Oh, it's definitely AI. But yeah, compare that, the big boy, the big Obi-Wan, compared to Darth Trump with a red lightsaber. Again, I can't even tell if they're trying to bait people or if they genuinely are that stupid and they don't know that a red lightsaber means you're a Sith.
I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if they were not real Star Wars fans at all in the White House. When I saw JD Vance simping for the prequels, and I went back, because listen, guys, there's a very simple way to find out if somebody is being organic when they are simping for the prequels. You have to figure out how old they were when the prequels came out. If they came out when you were 7, if they came out when you were 12, you're going to think it's so badass. You're not going to have a single problem with the storyline. You're not going to be like, wow, the design was, you're going to just be like, oh yeah, I got bored during the parts where they were talking, but I loved the action sequences. And you're going to be totally stoked with that. And then when you get older, you'll be like, wow, now I finally understand all the shit that they were saying in these scenes. And you'll feel like you got some, real mystery solved in your life. So you'll have some nostalgia for it, right? But if you're like 18, 19, 20 years old when these damn sequels come out, even 15 years old, like
the prequels or the sequels?
The prequels, sorry.
Okay, yeah.
You're going to be like, man, this is lame. This is crap. So I think JD Vance is a fake fan. I don't think Star Wars has been a presence in this White House or this administration. But what I will give to the big boy from Illinois was he does give a little bit more of an authentic Star Wars fan.
Although some people did point out hilariously that that's his wife posing next to him as Princess Leia, who is Luke Skywalker's sister in the freaking film. So it's a little bit weird.
But a lot of couples do that, I feel like, even though it's weird.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, who else are you going to dress up as if you're a,
he should have been Han Solo if you wanted to have Leia dress up with him.
True.
That would have been more.
Or he could have been Jabba and she could have been slave Leia.
Would have been even
in the bikini.
Then I would have loved it.
Then he would be the number one on this list.
In a bikini. I do need to see him in a Jabba the Hutt.
I'm sure she could, make it work. But,
but the first lady of Illinois. I mean, have some standards. Geez, this man has presidential ambitions. He's not Donald Trump. He's not going to let you see his wife's nipples. Anyway.
Yeah, but JB Pritzker, I do think he will be a contender. I think people will like him just at a visual level on the stage next to Trump. I've been saying that for a while. Don't underestimate the big boy. I think that was a big part of Fetterman's appeal too, right? Back in the day, people just like seeing this giant hulking oaf of a man who happens to be on the right side of a lot of issues and have pretty good politics. So, at least for a governor, I know he's done a bunch of shit that we disagree with, but like compared to what the fucking competition would be.
No, that quote you read was really good.
Yeah.
And I want to hear more of that from him. I just was really aggrieved. I was like, you fucking billionaire scum. You're going to vote against worker protections. How dare you? Oh, from your Hyatt hotel. It doesn't even impact your Hyatt hotels. If it was, if it did, I would be really pissed off. But I was like, how are you going to veto this? Apparently, some people in high places were like, we are not going to all this trouble to protect our warehouse workers in Chicago, which is bullshit. And he had so much power. The reason why he didn't do it, guys, is it's because there's so much in the broader Chicago metropolitan area and along Lake Michigan, in all of, Illinois, there's tons of warehouse workers. And therefore, there's a lot of lobbying that goes against making sure that the owners of those warehouses have to meet workplace protection requirements. And he was like, this is half baked. I'm like, it passed in Minnesota where Tim Walz lived. It's just crazy.
Yeah, that is completely disgusting. So yeah, all my memes and praise of JB Pritzker obviously comes with that as a big caveat. But I do think he has a good, persona that people will like. And although there is a big anti-billionaire backlash right now, I don't think that's going to stop him. I really don't. I think people will, especially if he leans into the FDR thing, which he should. He should just be like, yep, I'm FDR. I'm a class trader. I'm a billionaire, but that means I know how to really stick it to these fuckers. Like people will fall for that.
I think they would fall for that. That's true. Especially now that the Democrats are so horny for like their version of Trump.
Yep.
It's like, he's your Oprah Winfrey. Here you go. The person you were waiting for. But anyway, we can move on.
What do you think about this, Zach? At number 5 above Mr. Pritzker is Andy Beshear of Kentucky.
I actually think Andy Beshear is going to be pretty irrelevant in 2028. I think that this is a miss from the Edding Germentum guy.
You think it's a miss?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be in the top 5 for sure. I think Pete Buttigieg will be way more impactful, and I would argue that JB Pritzker would also be way more impactful. I don't think we're going to hear a ton from Andy Beshear. To be honest, that's my hot take. Maybe you disagree with me. That would be fun. I don't think we're going to hear from this guy. He seems like yesterday's news.
Okay, well, here's the thing. He's about to be termed out in Kentucky. So what the fuck else is he going to do if not run for president?
Probably fall out of everybody's purview. You know what I mean? And just be irrelevant.
You think he'd rather just do nothing than stay in the spotlight? That doesn't sound like a politician to me.
I think it's a little early to start running for president. And if he's
not going to declare tomorrow, but I just mean by 2027, I think he will have.
But that's true. But that's 2 years from now. People will be like, this guy's been out of politics. I think they'll brush him under the rug. I don't think Andy Beshear has his breakout moment 2.5 years after he's done being governor of Kentucky.
Fair enough. I do think it is pretty powerful, though, compared to someone like Pete Buttigieg, who, as you mentioned, has never won statewide. Andy Beshear genuinely is a red state Democratic governor. He is elected twice now in Kentucky, which is undeniably a red state. I don't know the last time fucking Kentucky voted for a Democrat on the presidential level. But here he is, Andy Beshear, two-time elected, very popular, very interesting guy, has a, big classic American family. People, I remember, love to post those memes about like how picking him as VP would piss off the right wingers because he has like the most, stereotypical American family, other clean cut kids, all this stupid shit. But I do think that that's a powerful thing. Winning in Kentucky, being a powerhouse in that state, and having electoral viability in that state, I do think it's important.
I totally agree with you, but I think he would be better served trying to get Mitch McConnell's seat and be a senator. I think that's way more likely for somebody of his political stature right now. I think he needs to get a little bit more nationally known. I think he's going to be coming up against some guys who have a big national presence. These are people who are household names. Pete Buttigieg is a household name. JB Pritzker might not be a household name. Bernie Sanders is. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is. Gretchen Whitmer is. You know what I mean? These are people that everyone knows nationally. They have a very high profile. I don't think Andy Beshear has anywhere near that high of a profile. What he does have is the trust of people of Kentucky, and I think it would be a huge blow to the Republican Party to flip the seat that once belonged to Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, 100%. On a personal level, I will say I like Andy Beshear more than a lot of the other people on this list because I don't think he's a narcissist who's obsessed with attention and celebrity. There's so many people that are in this conversation who you can just tell, like, they've been making it clear for 4 or even 8 years now that they're desperate to run for president. Andy Beshear does genuinely seem focused on his job. He seems like he's really a genuinely good governor. Seems like people in Kentucky like him. And it doesn't seem like his whole life is just revolving around like how to angle for 2028, So I genuinely like that authenticity and sincerity from him. And there's a chance that the electorate might sense that as well, compared to some of the more greasy folks on this list who have just, again, been making it so obvious where their ambitions truly lie. But we'll see. I do kind of agree with you, though. Despite all of that, I don't know if he has the star power to really, make a dent in the election. And I wouldn't put him above a JB Pritzker or a Pete Buttigieg either.
Who do we have at number 4?
Number 4, former Vice President Kamala Harris.
Way too high. Way too high. Honestly, she should have been up there with. I'm sorry, people in the chat are going to be offended. We can't. One of the things that I've always said, and I used to say this about Donald Trump, is that once you've run for president and lost on a major party ticket, you need to just kind of, abscond for a while. You need to go sign a book deal, hang out with Richard Branson. I don't care what you do, but you need to step back for a little bit because clearly the public didn't rock with you. Right now, was she at every single disadvantage? You could argue for sure. She didn't have enough time to campaign. You could argue that, obviously as a black woman in America, that argument makes itself.
And right? Biden was still kind of controlling her even after she had been the nominee.
100%. She had the worst campaign advice I've ever read about in my entire life. These are all very, very true. And you could talk about how it's not fair and it's wrong. And we're talking about winning. And we're talking about who has the best chance to win. I think you put Kamala Harris at number 10 if you keep her on this list. What do you think?
I actually don't disagree with Edinger Minton's positioning of her. And I'll tell you why, Zach. As much as I would like to agree with what you're saying, who were the last couple nominees of the Democratic Party? Freaking Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, two people that it was just like they were the least exciting, but it was kind of their turn. And, Joe Biden had been the VP and everyone said, oh, there's no way the voters actually vote for him. But a lot of Democratic voters they're just like creatures of habit. They're terrified by the media. They do whatever the fuck Joe Scarborough tells them to. So I could see a situation where she's really comes back strong, has this huge event launch, and she's like, I told you so. And, all this crap. I could see it. I could see her at least being a major contender in the primary, although I don't think she's going to win.
I hope you're wrong. My instinct is that she doesn't actually get in the race again. My gut instinct is that if she gets back into politics, it's for the governor race. And at first I was like, no, she won't slum it and go for something that's of a lower caliber. But I think her ego is bruised and she's looking for a tune-up fight. And I think that she thinks she can win the California gubernatorial race. She might be right. I think that we have a much greater chance of seeing her get in that arena than we do back into the primary, which was horrible for her. And the only chance she became the nominee, or the only reason she became the nominee was because she was vice president first. She was never going to survive in a Democratic primary. That's just the way it is, folks.
Yep, 100%. I agree with that. I also think she'll go for the easy win that is the California governor's mansion, because like that would kind of really destroy her political career. Two humiliating losses in a row. Like, come on. At least she can follow up that humiliating loss with an easy win. Again, by going for the California governor's race, which is embarrassing because even good candidates like Katie Porter have basically implied they'll drop out of that race out of respect for Kamala if she enters it. So she has the whole fucking field cleared for her by all these pussy Democrats who are more than willing to just be like, oh, I'll get out of the way for you, Madam Vice President. Either way, if I were her, I'd rather do that. I'd rather run in a race that was basically rigged for me to win than a massive uphill battle where I'm eventually rejected by the people for the fucking third time. Like, for sure. So I think that's what she'll do. But again, knowing the Democratic Party and its voter base, I don't exactly blame Edinger Minton for putting her this high on the list. Let's see who number 3 is, though, Zach.
AOC, I actually think this is a really good place for AOC on this list. Listen, guys, the Met Gala was last night. I was somebody, Gavin was somebody. We were very critical. I remember even Sam Cedar was like, oh, I would not have done this at all. Like, he doesn't like to criticize AOC because he's a New Yorker, she's a New Yorker, and one of the best we've got, right? So if you're drawing out like this is a little bit cringy from, old Sam Cedar, I was like, all right, we can all be unified in the fact that was not the correct political maneuver, right?
He wasn't at the Met Gala again, though, was he?
No. I'm just going back. I'm just saying, you guys, as I'm about to heap a lot of praise on her, and also after it came out, obviously she lied about the ceasefire at the DNC. That was a huge blow. What she's done right is been almost every single rally with Bernie Sanders right at his side, give barn burning speeches. She put out a great video about her time in like Utah or Idaho or something like that. That was really well edited. A lot of people were speculating that was her hinting at a presidential run, because it's like, why would you, a New York congressman, be interested in what the people of the, this Western Rocky Mountain state have to say?
It was Idaho.
It was Idaho. Okay. I was like, I knew it was one of those states. Either way, very unique state to be putting a, teaser out about if you don't have national political ambitions. And I thought that she crushed it. And I think the fact that she's owning the fact that she was working class, that we should have a politics that's by and for the people. You know what I mean? Obviously, it's an uphill battle. The United States has rejected the first and only 2 main party women that were nominated for the Democratic Party, but it would be horseshit for me to come out here and tell you guys we should stop trying. I think AOC could really get the job done. I worry that she is a little young. She's like 37 right now. I guess she'll be about Barack Obama's age by the time that she runs. You know what I mean? Because we have a few years down the line. She'd be younger, probably one of the youngest presidential candidates that we've had in a long time if she were to secure the nomination. But I think she has a lot of spunk. I think she has a lot of crossover. I think she's a great speaker from the stump. And despite the fact that I have a lot of political disagreements with her on the sidelines, she would probably have the most overlap with my politics out of anybody we could see get the nomination besides a Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, 100%. Who's not on this list? I guess Edinger Minton decided he's too old. He's not going to run. Honestly, I would have put him on this list.
I'd have put him on the list too.
Yeah, with the rallies he's doing. I mean, come on, bro. Like, he's basically running for president already. And even if he doesn't actually run for president, he's clearly going to be involved in this primary, whether it's through an endorsement or, campaigning with AOC. Like, I wouldn't be surprised even if Bernie doesn't run for president, say AOC does. I still think Bernie comes with her on tour like they have been doing as part of the Fight the Oligarchy tour. I don't think someone like AOC is so narcissistic that they would be afraid of that. I think they'd be like, hell yeah, please help me. People love you. People will turn out for you, and that'll increase my support. So I think it could be kind of a joint, VP, president, or running mate, whatever, top of the ticket thing. Who knows if that is what ends up happening, but I just feel like Bernie's
introduced her as like his daughter or as like his granddaughter or something. Like, I think he called her his daughter, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which is like what larger endorsement from the Sandman, from the Burnmeister himself.
Yeah.
Okay. Could you possibly ask for it? And you know what, guys? I have massive disagreements with Bernie Sanders on some issues, right? I wish that he would be a lot more forceful on Palestine, right? A lot of people bring that up. I agree with you. But I think that in America right now, there is not a better politician to get an endorsement from than Bernie Sanders. To have somebody say, you are the one I want to carry the torch when I'm done. Bernie Sanders to AOC, it's clear. And I think it really puts wind in her sails.
100%. Agreed. That endorsement's going to be massive. Potentially even bigger than the endorsement of an Obama or whatever at this point. Although Who knows? In the last primary, obviously Obama waited until it was completely meaningless for him to weigh in, which was hilarious because he didn't even endorse his former VP until, again, that was inevitable. But let's take a look here. Number 2, Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania. I don't know, bro, because obviously I don't want this to happen. I don't like Josh Shapiro, but I can't disagree that he will be a very formidable opponent. For one, he has this whole thing going, which is that, if Kamala had picked me as her VP, then we'd be in the White House right now. There's a lot of Democrats that really, hold on to that copium and that bullshit, opinion that, like he should have got picked as VP. And if he had been picked as running mate, then Kamala would have won, yada, yada, yada. But let's take a look at the analysis. Once again, Josh Shapiro stands out as the Democratic Party's white centrist apex predator, more accomplished than Pete, from a more important state than Whitmer, and the biggest media darling in the Democratic Party today. Shapiro is set to lift off like a rocket right after an assuredly decisive 2026 re-election victory. Not much has changed about him from last time, with the exception that he has notably and wisely avoided the kind of reconciliation with Trumpism that Newsom and Whitmer have stupidly been attempting. Not only does this speak well to his instincts, but it makes it all the easier for him to consolidate a centrist lane that has become steadily less crowded as a result of their mistakes. The ever-decreasing popularity of his brand of politics is a problem, of course, but by remaining virulently anti-Trump, he can easily overcome the main issue Democratic voters have with most politicians in his faction. The only reason why his standing has fallen is that an ever-improving national environment for Democrats has boosted the chances of other politicians with less secure 2026 re-elects than him, which brings us to the new number 1 on this list. We're about to take a look at that. But I will say, Zach, the one thing about Josh Shapiro that I keep hearing from people in Pennsylvania, and again, it brings me no joy to say this, but that, like, if you're not from Pennsylvania, you might not really get this, but people in Pennsylvania apparently do love this guy, and he has a very high popularity within the state. People seem really enthusiastic about his leadership there. So again, out of all of my freaking issues with him, I do think he's going to be a serious and formidable opponent in 2028.
I, along with everyone else in my fleet of minions, are going to devote ourselves full time to blasting every single true crime podcaster with the scoop that this man covered up a murder in Pennsylvania to secure more money from the murderer's father and to repay some favors. That is the scoop you guys can look into, okay? Because it happened under his watch. It's very sus, and something that came up when he was in the VP contention, and then he got dropped in exchange for our man Tim Walz. Gavin and I were firm Walz warriors. It was Cenk Uygur who was making the case that Josh Shapiro was the real progressive choice, which he absolutely was not. And here's the other thing about Josh Shapiro is this dude is a ridiculous Zionist. This dude fucking will not come out and call for any kind of ceasefire. This dude is not going to come out here and change the foreign policy of the current administration or the last administration. And I think that is a big red flag for a lot of Democratic primary voters. So those would be my 2 biggest concerns. I agree with a lot of what you said, Gavin, but I find this guy really unlikable, and I don't think that he's going to have the success that maybe Edinger Mentum and potentially Gavin are predicting, but that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'm just used to, the result I don't want to happening. So I'm coaching a lot of my analysis in that. Obviously, if this list was like the order in which I wanted things to go, he would be fucking not even on it. Sure. But I do worry that he's going to be a serious contender. Although I still do think that true crime story you referenced, that absolutely real insane shit. We talked about it during the VP, when that was happening, when Kamala was trying to figure out who her running mate would be. This guy literally did cover up the brutal murder of a woman who was stabbed like 30 fucking times, something crazy like that. And this isn't actually a very popular true crime case to follow. Like, I remember talking to my sister who loves true crime about Josh Shapiro, and when I brought up the Ellen Greenberg case, her eyes lit up. She's like, "Oh, Ellen Greenberg, I'm all over that shit. I watch updates on it every week." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, well, guess who the fucking governor was?" She's like, "Oh, Josh Shapiro, that's who you're talking about? He's the villain of this case, right? He's the guy."
He was the attorney general at the time.
Yep. So I do think that true crime, it's really a big thing. A lot of people that aren't super political are really into it. And if this guy got seriously elevated on a nationwide level, I do think this would become a huge scandal.
Yeah, and let me just read this to you guys. This man's attorney general, and he oversaw this after he received campaign financial contributions from the murder suspect's father. All right. A woman was stabbed 20 times in the front and the back. Her death was obviously initially ruled a homicide because God, who in their right mind or wrong mind would stab themselves 20 times in the front and back? And then under Josh Shapiro's watchful eye, it was switched to a suicide, which absolutely did not fucking happen. It was not a suicide. It was a clear murder. And the number one suspect, again, I say, had an old pops who was greasing the palms of Josh Shapiro. Fuck that guy.
Yep. And again, I mean, imagine stabbing yourself that many. I don't even think it's possible.
No.
If you were, no matter how suicidal you were, I don't think you could literally continue to stab yourself at that many times. You'd bleed out or you just lose the energy. But either way, I do think that will come back to haunt Josh Shapiro. Let's hope it comes back to haunt him before he wins the primary, because that would really fuck the Democrats.
Fox News would run with it every
Oh
single
my
day.
God. Could you imagine if it's like JD Vance or Donald Trump Jr. versus Josh Shapiro, and then all of a sudden in the week following or leading up to the election, all anyone is talking about is Ellen Greenberg? Oh my God. It would be the worst case scenario. We cannot let this guy get the nomination, but he will try. He will try. Luckily, Zach, I do think there's this described him, how'd they say it? The white centrist apex predator.
Yeah.
Well, luckily another white centrist apex predator has entered the ring. And luckily I do like him a little bit more than Josh Shapiro. That's Jon Ossoff of Georgia, who's almost certainly going to win his reelection in the state because of the fact that the governor of Georgia has just decided not to run in that election. A lot of people thought that Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, would challenge Jon Ossoff for the Senate seat. And Brian Kemp is very popular as the governor in Georgia for some reason. He's even more popular than Trump. I don't really know what people like about him so much. He seems very generic, but for whatever reason, people in Georgia trust Brian Kemp, and he's not going to run against Jon Ossoff. So that basically guarantees, Jon Ossoff's reelection. But here's where it gets really interesting, Zach. It's not just Brian Kemp that people were talking about running in this election. Some people think that Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to declare her candidacy for the Senate. And most people agree, most analysts agree, right and left, that if that happens, Jon Ossoff will destroy her in humiliating fashion. Even though it's a red state that voted for Trump, it's just so obvious who's the more serious person, that being Jon Ossoff, that Marjorie Taylor Greene would get destroyed. And I personally cannot think of a better scenario to lead into a Democratic primary than that. Not only this guy winning re-election in the state of Georgia, obviously a hugely important state for Democrats to win, and one that someone like Pete Buttigieg can't necessarily perform in, but doing it by walloping one of the biggest and most just gross villains of MAGA, Marjorie Taylor Greene. That would be epic. Democrats would love it. It would be the exact sort of inspirational story that they freaking obsess over. And I do think it would position this guy very, very nicely for a run.
Yeah, I think you're totally right about that. And I think Edinger Mentum is really on to something with this prediction. I hadn't considered Jon Ossoff a ton, right? He's a little milk toast, a little center left for my taste, right? Emphasis on center, but he's a guy that can win, and he can win in Georgia. And you're right to point out that Georgia is not Alabama, Mississippi, or Louisiana. Georgia has a massive suburban and massive blue population in Atlanta. They also have, Savannah. They have Athens. There's a lot of blue pockets to Georgia that have historically been drowned out by the overwhelming redness of the state. But depending on voter turnout, and as more people move to Atlanta and other parts of Georgia who are a little bit more blue leaning, you're going to see more success potentially, right? You have to really underperform like Joe Biden to lose it. And a guy like Jon Ossoff with a proven track record running against somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, it's a tremendous springboard. And it's why I don't think somebody like Josh Shapiro is going to be able to break through this time around. I think that Jon Ossoff and Pete Buttigieg have such a higher profile than him already in the eyes of people who might be right. Well, not so much Jon Ossoff. Maybe he could be coming around the corner, but I think potentially after this a high profile Senate race, potentially if it's against Marjorie Taylor Greene, I just think that he kind of takes the spotlight that would have gone to a Josh Shapiro. And then you have JB Pritzker, who can crowd his way in because he can spend as much money on his own race for president. It won't be a problem how much money he needs to spend. We can't forget he's a billionaire, so that does give him a huge advantage. Then you have a progressive getting in there. The Democratic Party is going to rely on diversity. I imagine that there's going to be at least some other woman that the establishment really promotes, the Amy Klobuchar of the race, somebody to getting. I'm not suggesting it will be Amy Klobuchar.
Yeah.
I'm just suggesting there will be another more centrist woman that does decide to run for president in the primary, if for no other reason than to add a splash of, I'm a woman, hear me roar, like a Kristen Gillibrand. I don't know. I'm sorry if that sounded sexist, but that's how the Democratic Party thinks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do think it's going to be a lot of the women, including Gretchen Whitmer. This honestly might even explain her recent behavior. I think they've kind of taken themselves out of contention because of the fact of what happened to Kamala Harris. I think a lot of women like Gretchen Whitmer, in 2024, they thought I could really do this. But now they really feel like a lot of Democratic voters are just going to be too scared to vote for a female candidate. And again, I've heard that anecdotally from people I know that are like, that really do blame Kamala's loss on the fact that she was a woman. And a lot of people have internalized that. They think that, this country just won't elect a woman. It just won't happen. We're too sexist. We're too racist, whatever. So I do worry about that, even when it comes to an AOC or something like that. But do you agree with that, or do you think that America is not too sexist to vote for a woman?
I mean, it's so hard to argue with it, but I don't think it's right. So I don't think we should allow. I want to win, and I think it's possible to win with a woman. I think it's totally possible to win with a woman. Will you be at a disadvantage? I think historically, it's been proven out that yes, there are a lot of people who are prejudiced in this country, but I don't think that we can let that stop us as the left. And I think that if AOC were to really get momentum behind her, it would not be on my mind at all that she's a woman. It would be in my mind about coalition building. I think that it is a bummer, and it's unfortunate that Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton both lost, but I don't think that they were necessarily standout world breaker candidates.
Anyway. They weren't, but that's the issue because, it sucks, right? But I do think that a lot of Democrats just look at the fact that the last two candidates that the Democratic Party has that were female lost. And I think that that's really scarred the voting base, a voting base that not that long ago was more than ready to embrace that idea. They were so excited about, I'm with her. They made Hillary's entire fucking candidacy based around her sex and her gender, right? But now I do think, and again, it's not right. It's obviously not right at all. But yeah, I do think a lot of Democratic voters are just going to be too scared to really get behind a female candidate, specifically a female candidate of color, which again is unfortunate, but it's an awkward reality.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Biden, kneecapped Kamala Harris when he said he only picked her because he needed a black woman. That was horrible. But I did want to point out that if Marjorie Taylor Greene does decide to run for Senate, right now she is polling in last place. So it will be a layup. It will be a slam dunk because I think, assuming she can get through the primary, which coming in last place is doubtful, I imagine she would be able to put her back into it and potentially win the Republican primary.
If Trump endorses her, then she will get through the primary.
Yeah, and I think he would. Yeah. I think he would.
I do too.
We're going to talk a little bit more about Marjorie Taylor Greene in 1 second, I guess, after we're done speculating about the horse race. But either way, if she does run against Jon Ossoff, it makes it way easier for him to have a path to the presidency because he's going to look so good destroying her, and he's going to get so much free press looking amazing. And I don't think you can undervalue that. I think that is priceless shit. And I think it'll help him kind of distinguish himself from the Josh Shapiro, who, again, I think is cancer for the Democratic Party with that fucking case hanging over his head.
Yeah, really more people need to be talking about that. As I said, true crime is huge. You think political content is big on YouTube? Political content ain't shit compared to true crime. Like even the biggest political channels get a fucking fraction of the views and attention that the biggest true crime channels get. Trust me, I consume some of the content. I know. But yeah, Jon Ossoff, definitely someone to keep an eye on. And I do appreciate Edinger Minton, going out on a bit of a limb here to be like, I know a lot of people aren't saying this, but I'm willing to put him at number one anyway. He says, I knew this was a risk, but I still put him at number one anyway, if only for the logic that anyone who expects 2026 to be a blue year should have expected him to win, even against Kemp. This was contestable, but I believed in it and prepared to spend a lot of time in the comments explaining my logic. So again, I think that this is a prediction, much like the Nate Silver prediction that Obama would win the 2008 primary. Really put Nate Silver on the map. In fact, that's the reason why anyone knows why Nate Silver is because he correctly predicted Obama in 2007 or whatever, like way before anyone
when it was Hillary's fucking election. I don't think people understand if you were not like a crazy person or raised in a political household. You know what I mean? Or if you were just older than us, I guess. A lot of people our age don't know this, is what I'm saying. Hillary Clinton was the candidate in 2008 until Barack Obama burst onto the scene. And he really had a meteoric rise that we have not seen since.
Yeah, 100%. So I do think that, there's a chance that this turns into the same thing where Edinger Minton was really on the money here. Not a lot of people are talking about Jon Ossoff right now. but I think a lot of people will come 2027, especially if he does trounce Marjorie Taylor Greene or whoever he runs against. It doesn't have to be Marjorie. I think no matter what, assuming he wins re-election in Georgia, I think he's going to be really well set up. I also just think that, maybe it's just a personal thing because I'm a filmmaker, but this guy, he comes from the world of documentary filmmaking. He's been an activist for most of his life. He's had a reputation in left-wing circles as a serious person, not a corporatist. According to Ryan Grimm's analysis, once he was elected to the Senate, he did kind of back off some of his more like hyper progressive left-wing instincts. And obviously you guys have noticed he's not an AOC. He's not a Jasmine Crockett. He kind of
not a Bernie Sanders,
not a Bernie Sanders.
Warren.
Right. He kind of, he doesn't like go out on a limb or do anything crazy. But according to Ryan Grimm's assessment, at least, this guy does have a real history with an activist base. He actually comes from like the activist world of progressivism or whatever you want to call it. And like I said, he was a documentary filmmaker and his films focused on activist issues. So it's not like this guy has spent his life as a McKinsey type or a sellout or, a corporate lobbyist. No, I actually do appreciate the origin story of Jon Ossoff. And, if you read more about him, you'll find that he does have a pretty cool, inspirational story. I don't know if that matters, but I do think it separates him from a guy like Pete Buttigieg, who's just so clearly has spent his entire life on this fucking path trying with every move to advance this ambition of becoming president. And I think most people kind of get that sense. You can kind of tell like, oh, this person is, they're in it to keep climbing the ladder. I think Jon Ossoff comes off more like a real guy with a real story who just happened to find himself in a place of leadership. I decided to step up and run, but it's not like I've been planning that for my entire fucking life methodically in a calculated sociopathic way. So I do think that matters. It definitely matters to me. And we'll see, hopefully, if he does get in a position of power where he's not in a precarious purple state like Georgia, hopefully he would actually flex his progressive instincts a little bit more than he has as a senator.
Yeah, I think that the other thing that can't go undercounted, and I'm sorry if this sounds really superficial, I think American politics is really superficial a lot of the time. This guy's going to look excellent on TV. He's very handsome. He's incredibly well-spoken. And I think that he has a lot of the Obama traits without looking like a guy who is just trying to do an Obama impression, right? And that doesn't work. We saw that with Pete Buttigieg and Cory Booker in 2020. People can sniff that out. He has this aura of like an old school American politician. And yes, that means male. And yes, that means white. And yes, that means from the South. But I think all of those things might, in a way that is wrong and in a way that, reflects poorly on the American public as a whole. Even as we become a more diverse country than ever, it seems like so much of the population is determined to hold on to the, white leadership structure of the past. I hate that. I abhor that. I oppose that. But factoring into the fact that is our real world right now, that's the world we live in. I think that Jon Ossoff is kind of cookie cutter made. And I agree, it doesn't matter if MTG is the one that runs against him, but I think it's perfect and way better for him if he is running against Marjorie Taylor Greene. Not just because he'll curb stomp her, but again, because of all that free media attention. This becomes a way hotter race, and not because it's close, but because he's going to win it and he's going to humiliate her. And that's the kind of shit that'll tee you up for a tremendous presidential run. That'll be like whoosh. I feel like he has everything that people wanted Beto O'Rourke to have, but Beto O'Rourke did not have.
100%. That's a great point. And unlike Beto, Jon Ossoff was actually able to win statewide in a red state. Georgia, he actually won in Georgia, and he's going to win re-election in Georgia, which again is not something that you could say about like a Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg performed miserably with voters of color in states like Nevada. I forget if he even made it to South Carolina or if he had dropped out before then, but had he made it to South Carolina, it would not have been pretty. He would have been absolutely he would have come in like 6th place. Like the black voters in the Democratic Party just outright rejected Pete Buttigieg specifically. Clearly that's not the case with Ossoff. So I do think that, again, he has kind of that Pete Buttigieg, angle, but he actually has a track record of appealing to diverse voters in the South. He could actually carry the Democrats to victory in general election, right? Because I think Pete Buttigieg is a decent candidate in a primary, but Jon Ossoff is a rereal powerhouse in a general election, and I think he would just destroy the Republican in a general election. I actually do have optimism about this guy. I'm sure he can point to some terrible votes he's made, but I do think he's markedly different and better than someone like a Pete Buttigieg, who's, again, right out of McKinsey.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on the fact that it's also very beneficial. He's young. He's very young looking, and not just, handsome, but young looking, youthful, spry. He looks like he's got some gas in the tank. Just a tremendous juxtaposition from the past couple of administrations. Even by the tail end of Barack Obama, he was still far more youthful than Joe Biden or Donald Trump, but you could tell that the office had worn on him. It would be nice to get what could be considered like a real youthful person back in the White House like we had in 2008. But anyway, that was a great discussion. Shout out to Edinger Mentum for writing this piece.
Look out the door if you hear an ambulance. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there. Be there. The Vanguard will be there.